Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest in the hashtag Building Life webinar series, which is co-hosted today by the World Green Buildings Council and FIEC, the European Construction Industry Federation. My name is Sue Arundale, and I'm responsible in FIEC for technical and environmental affairs. This morning, we're going to hear about taxonomy, and our backdrop is the consultation on the proposals for the taxonomy criteria for the built environment in the key areas of circular economy and biodiversity. We're going to hear from three speakers. Our first is Professor Marcia Traverso, who is a full professor and head of the Institute of Sustainability in Civil Engineering at the Technical University of Aachen in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. Marcia is also the rapporteur of the technical working group of the EU Platform on Sustainable Finance, which has developed the proposed criteria, and she will tell us about the group's work. Then, World Green Building Council's representative for the platform, Stephen Richardson, will tell us more about the criteria for biodiversity. And finally, we will hear from Pekka Virinen, who is FIEC's permanent member of the platform. Pekka will talk to us about civil engineering's contribution to the circular economy. Now, after hearing from all three speakers, you will have the chance to ask questions using the online question and answer forum, where you can type your question. And we will take a selection of these for the webinar, but the speakers can also answer directly in the forum, so do take advantage of this facility. Speakers, I would like you to ask you to stick to your allocated time so that we can have as much time as possible at the end for questions. So let's get started. Marcia, can you tell us about the technical working group?
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. You say everything about me, at least the most important things. So maybe just one, I'm not an economist, and I'm here mainly for the technical expertise on building sector and on the environmental assessment of the building sector. In general, for the environmental assessment of building sector is one of my priority sector, because we are the Institute for Sustainability in Civil Engineering at RWTH Aachen University. Today, I will give you a really short introduction on our work. So some details, some more insight. So moving maybe to the next slide, Stephen, we can see what is the EU taxonomy, or what we are deliver now. Generally, the EU taxonomy is a list of economic activity that are considered environmentally sustainable for investment purpose. And of course, the main goal is to reorienting capital flow towards more sustainable investment and providing clarity and transparency on environmental sustainability for investor, financial institution, and company. Actually, what we are doing, the focus is on the environmental part, so that's why I'm focusing there. But at the end, the economic activity will take into account also the minimum requirements for social aspect. So that's why we can call this activity sustainable for the investment purpose. Next slide. This give you a bit an overview how is a structure the work for the EU taxonomy. So we are working group. I'm part of the chair is Nathan Fabian, and then me and Ben Allen, we are the co-rapporteur to the technical working group, the focus on the environmental aspect, environmental criteria. Then we have Nancy Saez, that she's working more on in subgroup 3 and lead it as a rapporteur for the advice on extension of taxonomy to significant harmful and low impact activities, so the extreme, because we are focusing on which those activities that can make a substantial contribution, at least for one of the objectives. Instead, subgroup 3 take into account the rest. So what's going on for the rest? Then the subgroup 4, that is from the rapporteurs Antje Schneeweiss. She is advised more on what is the social objective, so what could be in the future social taxonomy. And then we have the subgroup 5 that work that's led by Helena Vines Fiestas. The advice more on the data availability, usability of criteria, so try to make the gap to understand how already the data on ESG can fit in the sustainability or in sustainable taxonomy. Next slide, what we are doing. So what's the focus on the technical working group? I mean, we know that before, we have already the first delegated act on climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation that was developed by the Technical Expert Group in, I think, between 2018 and 2020. And we have the focus of our work for the European platform is on the other 4 environmental objectives. So transition to circular economy, pollution prevention and control, sustainable use and protection of water and marine resource, and protection and restoration of the biodiversity and ecosystem. As you can see, these other 4 are quite substantial, quite complex. Of course, as well, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, but at least there we have an indicator clearly like CO2 equivalent that can help us to measure the performance. Instead, for the 4th, just think about transition to circular economy. There we have to work also to understand which are the state of the art in terms of data availability. So that was, a further challenge that we had in our work. To make our, how actually we work on all of 4. Next slide. Give you actually with this slide we work for sectors. So we received a list prioritized from a previous study done internally at the European Commission. We received a list of activities that have been prioritized through this study. We discussed, we agree that could be the first step. So we are not evaluating all the economic activity that can make a substantial contribution. It's not really possible. We have like a really crazy timeline. So, but we start with the first 55. So that's our first set of activity. And as you can see, we shape them in sectors. So also we build up a group or a team around each sector of 10 people, starting from the platform, the official member. We collect, we want to cover some gap, and we involved more external experts to cover all the aspects that we need to work with this 10 sectors. So as you see, building, construction and building, ICT, emerging services is a bit a mix, because construction and building, but then we have also emerging service and ICT, but somehow we have to, and with it we work, that was the focus for the building. Next slide give you an overview of our work. So we, as I said, we received selected activities. Then we had also already a methodology that was developed during tech, but also further adjusted by the JRC. We used this methodology, and of course we adapt when it was necessary to our needs. And we try to identify, so all the group, we try to identify which are significant contribution that each activity can deliver to the environmental objective for the ones that have been selected. Just maybe to clarify, so not all the selected activity have been prioritized for all the 4 environmental objective. there were, there were specific environmental objectives for each of the economic activity, because it was, as I said, the study was done in advance, and they tried to identify for which environmental objective the economic activity can deliver a substantial contribution. Of course, that was the first analysis that we did to understand if it's everything. We agree on the selection and on the proposal we receive. Sometimes we shape differently. And then I see we develop with also developing the technical screening criteria for do non-significant harm, because as you know, for the EU taxonomy, each economic activity must deliver a substantial contribution for at least one objective, but also meet the do not significant harm for the other 5, as well as the minimum requirements for the social aspect. That was not our focus. Then we deliver actually the draft criteria. They are right now in consultation process, so I invite you to have a look at it. If you have not done, you can directly go to the chapter, to the there is the report is made that you have all the first part is on the how we worked, and then you can the attachment is the further document is focused on each sector, so you can directly go to the energy construction sector and see which are the criteria developed for the specific sector. Then we, the public consultation, that mistake, sorry, it was not launched in June, was at the end launched at the end of July actually, and ran until 24th of September. And then afterwards, we will integrate the feedback in the final draft, and we will deliver to the European Commission as our proposal by November. Then we'll start a political process internally in the European Commission. Because please don't forget, the European platform, I forgot to say, we are an external entity that are working, and we will deliver a proposal to European Commission. Of course, we work close to European Commission, of course, with all experts, but we are an external entity. Next slide. And this gives you a bit the idea on our work for the complexity of our work, because we have four different, these other 4 objectives that are already quite complex themselves, but of course they also overlapping, and they also have a different perspective. We have a perspective, if you are familiar with the PCIR system, driving pressure, state, impact, and response framework, that's the environmental objectives they are developed, defined by the EU taxonomy, play different role. So we have circular economy is more a response. You have a list of activity, a list of requirements, not activity, requirements. They are more of possible substantial contribution. They are more in terms of response. Instead, for pollution, it's clearly the pressure, how it's written in the EU taxonomy directive, and instead for water and biodiversity is more at state impact. So that's why the indicator, also the way it's structured, the criteria structure is different. I'm taking too long. So next slide, just we are almost finished. So that's the draft is already delivered. It's running. As I said, you can find easily just you write TWG report for sustainable finance, and you find directly the link. Or that I can eventually the link here. So once you have the slide, you can also directly use it. And we can still receive feedback by the 24th of September. Last slide, next. That gives you the overview again of what we are doing. So we will receive the feedback, and we will integrate it. So the final recommendation will be by November 2021. And then that will start the development of the future, the second delegated act that will be more on the, the role will be played by the European Commission. We as states always have as a technical expert available to eventually support in question and in further, mainly further question and support. That's from my side. Thank you very much. Happy to answer to question or curiosity. I mean, I hope that I can answer you. Thank you again. Sue, I think you are mute. We cannot hear you.
That's a really good start, huh? Thank you very much, Marcia. And as we're switching over to Stephen's presentation, I just want to mention that there was already a question in the chat about the slides. And I'm pleased to tell you that the slides and the recording will both be available after the webinar. There's also another question already in the forum about circular economy, but we will take your questions at the end. And I'd like to move now on to Stephen, who's going to talk to us about biodiversity.
Thanks, Sue. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Marcia, for your introduction. Good to get that context. So you're going to hear about buildings, and then Pekka is going to be talking about civil engineering. So I'm going to start with the biodiversity criteria for buildings, and then I'll also talk about the circular economy criteria for buildings second. And you'll see there's going to be quite a bit of sort of overlap between what I'll say about buildings and what Pekka will then say about the civil engineering part. But we want to try and take you through the whole package. We'll try and do that relatively quickly. We've got quite a lot to get through. So on biodiversity, I'm going to start with the scope and the rationale. Then I'll
Stephen, could I just interrupt you for 1 second? We're not hearing you very well. I think it's not just me because there's a message in the chat. So I don't know if you can fix that. I would ask you to carry on. We will try and bear with you, but just wanted to let you know.
Okay, if I speak a bit louder, does that help? Is that better?
We have some crackling on the line. We can hear you. It's just a little bit disturbed, but try and carry on.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Apologies. Yeah, we'll hopefully it resolves itself. So biodiversity. We're talking here about, if you're familiar with NACE codes, we're looking at NACE code F41. The impacts of construction on biodiversity are primarily around land use change and surface sealing. So that's really what we're trying to mitigate. We've taken the EU's biodiversity strategy as our starting point. So the EU is aiming to achieve no net land take by 2050. So that means we need to avoid constructing in certain areas. Our approach has been to say, well, for greenfields, so undeveloped sites, there are many things linked to remediation, regeneration, which would have a more positive outcome on biodiversity than constructing a building, even if that building is well designed. But in the context of developed land, previously developed land, through sensitive design, through following best practice, construction can make a substantial contribution, we believe, to biodiversity and boosting natural habitat. So we think this is appropriate for the taxonomy to have criteria for construction. We've taken into account that biodiversity, in contrast to something like energy efficiency, which tends to be, if you like, fit and forget, not quite, but more so than biodiversity, where biodiversity is dynamic. It's something that needs to be looked at over time and in space. So we've tried to account for that in the proposals. So here you can see a summary of the recommendations for biodiversity. So we start with a qualitative requirement for a strategy, a biodiversity strategy or plan. It needs to be produced by a qualified ecologist. You can see that it covers these 5 areas: protecting endangered species, biodiversity net gain. So that's we're aiming here to improve the original state of the site, both in terms of general biodiversity and native species, mitigating impacts during construction, maintaining the features that are installed, and linking to the local networks and any local biodiversity strategy that applies. And then supporting that, there are these quantitative thresholds that you can see. I'm not going to read those out, but what I will say is that there are sort of two options for compliance. You can either simply demonstrate those percentages, or if there is a local what's called a green space factor, so that could be something like, sometimes they're called green point systems. Different cities have these already, and provided that doesn't have a lower ambition than the criteria listed above, then that green space factor can be used to demonstrate compliance. And briefly on the rationale, I should say we've got a similar set of criteria for acquisition and ownership, mirroring really what's in the new construction and major renovations part, but removing the bits related to construction. And then there's this final point, sorry, the bullets on showing properly here, it should say ABC. Point C at the bottom, for acquisition and ownership, there's this requirement to for this the compliance to be assessed on an ongoing basis. In terms of the thresholds, there is limited data available for us that we were able to find to pick the right levels for these quantitative thresholds. So we've based these on similar requirements from in the planning rules of leading cities. One question we've had is why it's just horizontal surfaces. The rationale there was that evidence we've found shows that vertical surfaces require a lot more maintenance, which in many cases isn't continued over time. So there's a risk that the planned contribution isn't delivered. So for the time being, we're excluding that, although from the net gain perspective within the strategy, it could count. So that was a very, very quick rattle through those criteria. On circular economy, again, scope is the NACE Code F41, so we're thinking about buildings, new construction and major renovations. I think it's pretty clear that construction has a significant impact on resource consumption, so I don't think anybody would debate that construction has the potential to make a substantial contribution to circularity. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the statistics here. I won't read them out for the sake of time. In terms of the criteria, and you'll see the parallels here with what Pekka will present later. We're first of all with the quantitative thresholds, we're aiming to reduce the amount of waste from construction going into landfill. So we've got a target of 90% that is prepared for reuse and recycling, and we're excluding backfilling. And then we're also we're setting a target on the material coming into the project. So a target of 30% should be from reused or recycled materials or byproducts. And then supporting that, we've got some qualitative criteria as well. So recognizing that circularity is not just about these waste metrics, it's also about future flexibility. So you'll see that there, relying on international and European standards. Also, the application of digital tools, we believe can have a positive impact, can support circularity objectives. So we've applied that for large buildings. And this requirement is LCA. That was included in the Delegated Act for large buildings on climate mitigation. We feel for circularity, it's important that that is applied across all projects that want to demonstrate circularity alignment. And really, this is one of the reasons for doing that is we think that in future it would be good to try and work on having quantitative thresholds for different LCA impact categories. But at the moment, there isn't very good data. So we believe that this disclosure approach initially will help generate the data that could lead to thresholds in the future. And again, finally, on rationale, the 90%, we're here looking at averages across the EU are around 80%. So we're obviously wanting to go beyond that, hence 90. And for the 30% threshold, here we're looking at the Circular Economy Action Plan, which is aiming to double material use rates. And for non-metallic minerals, which are the bulk of construction resource, currently that's around 15%, so doubling that is where we get the 30% from. And there is a note, if you've read the document, you'll see this note that we're aware that in some member states, it's possible to go significantly. There's evidence that projects go significantly higher than that, closer to 50. So we're recommending that we need better data to look at whether this criterion should be reviewed and improved in the near future. And I will stop there. I hope I've done okay on time. I'm going to hand over to Pekka, and he will take you through the civil engineering part. That's me done, and I look forward to your questions. I'm sure there'll be plenty. Thank you for your interest.
So just before we switch over to Pekka, there was a comment in the chat about doing a technical rehearsal. We did do that. So it just shows that even when you practice, things still go wrong. But maybe when you join us again, Stephen, maybe you could try switching off your camera. I don't know whether that would make any difference, but maybe we can try. Okay, Pekka, can you tell us about civil engineering and its contribution to circular economy?
Yes, I will, Sue, and thanks for giving the opportunity to be here with you. I hope my voice comes clear and loud to your ears from far away of you. So my regards from Helsinki, Finland, and we are the northern part of European Union. And of course, this area, civil engineering work, is very important to us also, and we are some kind of experts on that area. But anyway, I will discuss about civil engineering and its certain parts. I'm coming from the Confederation of Finnish Industries, and also the one who's paying my salary is the Finnish Association of Construction Product Industry. So we are under the same roof, and lots of good synergies in that. And I've been working with Ms. Arundale and also my Sherpa in the taxonomy work, Mr. Cartes, many years, and thanks for that. It's been very fantastic years. I'm representing FIEC at the platform, and we joined the work in October last year, and it was very important that the construction sector also got an invitation to the work. Its importance, meaning in built environment, is so huge, and of course the material flows we also already saw in Stephen's slides. It's giving the picture. How much materials we are handling, what are the value of the sector in that way. So it can also have a very huge potential to contribute in circular economy. Next slide, please. So I will discuss these three areas: new construction and reconstruction of civil engineering works, objects, maintenance of roads and motorways, and then maintenance of tunnels and bridges. There's a lot to repeat what Stephen said, of course, and I'm not going to repeat those all, but anyway, it's good to understand that maintenance is one of those areas we proposed to be included in the work. And it has also been debated a lot, but you might understand the meaning of it just when referring to the importance of civil engineering works as such, and especially roads and motorways, tunnels and bridges. It's a part connecting cities, areas, and so. And in my country, very good example. Whatever we are transporting, we always are facing long distances. And countries like Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, they are totally different in that way, but have the same problems. Then comparing, for instance, to Netherlands, we are facing different kind of challenges in this area, and we have faced during the work the fact that we can't just copy and paste what is good for instance, in the Netherlands. It's always applicable in Finland, but this is area that should be developed and taken very carefully. Next slide, please. First, new construction and reconstruction of civil engineering works or objects. We are working, as mentioned by Stephen, under the NACE code which is the construction, and here F45 is civil engineering works or civil engineering, and includes in this case roads and railways, tunnels, bridges, utility projects, many different types of those, and water projects. Next one, please. And it's easy to justify, like Mr. Richardson also made in case of buildings. We are dealing with huge material flows. And what is different perhaps with buildings and civil engineering works, projects, is the individual size. And in case, for instance, building motorways, roads between cities, we always dealing with huge material amounts, and of course the value of the assets are really huge, and they are long lasting. They should last forever in that way. And that's why also why we wanted to connect also maintenance to be very closely linked to civil engineering and circular economy. It's quite logical. How to make a substantial contribution? I think they are quite clear. They are I think the basics of a circular economy. It's about reduce raw material consumption, reduce generation of waste, increase recycling, increase reuse of those building elements, components, materials which are or could be used, taking into account technical requirements, and of course CO2 emissions also. Like Stephen Richardson mentioned, we also have to include assessment of CO2 in the future. I think to all projects, just to make comparisons on a fair basis. And then a very important part in circular economy, it's enhance long-term durability, is to prolong or make whatever asset we are building, we are using, we are repairing to last better and long-term. In buildings, it's energy performs a lot. In civil engineering works, it's about to maintain the value of assets. Next slide, please. Here shortly, the criteria we have just in consensus managed to put on paper, like this, about to repeat what Stephen Richardson already told about buildings. And where the numbers came, they are of course based on existing knowledge and cases in different member states, and we try to find some kind of starting point for this. But the consultation is very important here, especially in the case of civil engineering work. We need more information, we need statistics, we need experiences to be more precise, to make perhaps or propose new values, make them precise, where they came, how we can perhaps improve also the criteria. Construction waste is in the it's a hot topic, of course, and then to use recycled materials, it's one of those. It was clear that we have to include. And Stephen already mentioned digitalization and used digital tools. It's also very important. It's about manage better material flows and know what kind of materials we are using, what are the materials we used to use, how we can really use those in the future, because there are restrictions existing and there are technical requirements coming. What was good earlier, it's not perhaps good enough in the future. That's why this kind of material management and digital tools are really important. It's about management of the information. Next slide, please. About maintenance of roads and motorways, you could say it's copy-paste also to bridges. And anyway, we are working on the same NACE goals here, and it's about routine maintenance, it's about preventive maintenance, and also rehabilitation we are discussing here. Next one, please. Our rationale here is quite logical, again, or logic in that way. Maintenance as such contributes to a circular economy by reducing material consumption. And still material consumption, about 90% of roadworks are maintenance and construction works, only 10% new infrastructure works nowadays, or today. And amounts are, as said earlier, they are huge. This case in asphalt is a very good example, and it's about a possibility to also develop how we are making the substantial contribution here. It's for the maintenance activities and makes maintenance more circular. It's about develop new technologies which are already taken into use in certain countries, and copy and paste these best practices also, and potential is huge, as said. Please, next slide. Okay, as said, the maintenance is dedicated to pavement management and linked to the main elements of the road. This is what we have put on the paper in this case. Somehow somebody has asked me, is the first 100% is the theoretical value, but in case of, for instance, recycling at site or reusing at site asphalt, it's a very good example of these kind of activities. We also have discussed a lot about setting requirements on service life planning and producing or introducing better information about, for instance, life cycle and lifetime aspects. It's very important. That's why we also put some requirements on these on the criteria. Next one, please. This is just to repeat what was said earlier, but if you put on the next slide, I can raise one point. This is again quite a lot to repeat what was said in the previous slides. Next one, perhaps. This is just a collection of these criteria. So I want to stress this part, which is in the last line, and it's about importance to calculate or take into account parallel when setting targets, numerical targets, and how much to for instance, recycle, how much to use recycled material in the projects. We wanted to take this CO2 assessment also here into account. And let's see, Stephen Richardson said it's clear that LCA will come. There are, for instance, already in the new criteria for buildings, there's no requirement to calculate carbon footprint, so global warming potential. And in this case, the idea is that, for instance, in my country, we just have to make assessments. Is it justified to use this and this amount? Because we can also cause higher CO2 emissions if we are just, we don't have these materials and we have to transport, for instance, these materials 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers just to achieve the targets of 30% or something like this. And this is what we have debated a lot. As I said, the situation in different member states is not the same. It's different in Netherlands, it's different in Finland. And that's why I also see that LCA as such, or parts of it, like Stephen Richardson said, it's very important we develop this kind of assessment to be part of assessment of sustainability. I think that was my last slide, and finally I want to thank also my colleagues here in the platform, Ms. Traversen and Stephen Richardson. It has been very pleasure to work with you. I will continue also very eagerly. We are waiting the consultation, the results of the consultation, and I think it will be a very busy autumn time or the last month of this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Pekka. And let's move straight on to the questions. There's a bit of misleading information. Could you please put your questions in the Q&A box, because this is where we are reading them. So we are not actively following the chat for questions. So apologies if there's a misunderstanding there. And I'm going straight to the questions and answers. We've already had one about circular economy and whether this should in fact be seen rather as a means to an end than an end in itself. And we've had a couple of panelists already answer that question. So I would like to move straight on to the next one, and apologies in advance because we probably won't get all of these in. But the first question is to Stephen, and it's from Raphael Montiel. And it's a question about demolition and deconstruction. And the question is, although the questioner says that he knows there's probably been many discussions about this, he's asking you, Stephen, if you can sum up again why demolition and deconstruction is separated from new construction.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay, Sue? I turn my camera off.
We can.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Raphael. So I think to try and give a short answer is it relates to the fact that the taxonomy is structured according to economic activities. So demolition is a different economic activity from construction. So that's the reason it's been treated separately. So as with all aspects of the taxonomy, that it's quite likely that a single company will have to get to grips with different bits of criteria because they engage in different economic activities, but that's the way the taxonomy has been set up. So you'll probably hear this lots. I think whenever you're kind of giving responses, or if you want to give any feedback, if you've got suggestions to improve what's been proposed, that's the whole point of the consultation. Please do provide evidence. If there's evidence for why something should be done differently, that is going to help us to to make those changes, or to at least consider them very seriously. Without evidence, we're really going to struggle. So that would be a plea to everybody. If you're making responses, please do include references, evidence to sort of back that up. But I hope that gives a bit of an explanation for that, Raphael. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We have another question now about the role of robust forest certification schemes, such as FIEC, and the fact that these can ensure wood use in buildings, that when this is used, it comes from sustainably managed forests. And this question comes from Matteo Mascolo. Who wants to take this? Marcia, do you want to comment on this? Are you considering in the work the use of robust forest certification schemes?
I mean, we consider, but that's more. I mean, in building, I'm not sure, but for sure we consider it for we have a specific sector in forest management that there is to take into account.
Okay.
May I add something?
Yeah, please go ahead, Pekka.
I'm coming from a land of forest in that way. Of course, I would say this kind of certification, it's a basics, it's a baseline, but it doesn't guarantee as such. We need much more information about sustainable use of wood also. It's the same with all materials in that way, and just but as said, in this case, it's the baseline.
Maybe I can add something according to Pekka. I agree with Pekka. Please take into account that in the criteria, we try to fix like a threshold. So we need to understand which could be the differences, not just, so we need to know what the state of the art. So if FIEC is a state of the art, as it is for several cases, then we need to have a substantial contribution. We need something that goes beyond that.
Yeah. If I may shortly add something, it's about standardization. I've been working, my association is representing here in Finland the construction sector in ISO and standardization. I'm responsible for CEN/TC 350 tools, for instance, which they were referred to in Stephen's presentation, EN standards for building level assessment. And I'm convinced that we will, in coming years, in the near future, face challenges also. We have to review a lot of standards because there will be a much more, how could I say, a stricter look at what we have produced by financial side and also other stakeholders who are really, if they want to give green loans, 20 million euros, they want to really know what are the facts we are justifying to get the loan. If you understand my point here, the criteria, they will be cross-checked many times in the future. It's clear by different stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a question from Jack Barry now. Jack asks about the difference between reuse and recycling, and he's expressing concern that the criteria might result in a lot of preparation for recycling, but very little reuse. Who wants to take that?
I can start because
Okay.
we are just fighting with the problem here in Finland. Taking a closer look at the development of regulation in this country in energy performance, for instance, the windows here in my house, they are 10-year-old and they can't be used today according to new regulation. So it means it's a technical performance or technical requirement which is saying no to my old windows. And if we don't change the regulations to be more circular, acceptable, we are facing the problems. And reuse of old building elements. It's because buildings are also civil engineering structure. They are so long in use. How to just guarantee their new life, design life, and these kind of issues. Fire resistant or fire requirements, fire regulation, very good examples also. And also long-term durability in our case. Frost resistant. The requirements they have developed a lot during last decades, I would say. And our buildings are 50 years in use or 100 years in use. So it's a great challenge or big challenge.
And if I could just add to that, again, kind of repeating myself here, but the struggle we always have, or we have had all the way through, is finding data to back up and to sort of use as a reference point and a justification. And there's very poor data that we were able to find that sort of splits out, reuse versus recycling. So what we would really need is better data. There's some data in certain pockets, but there's not good data across the whole EU. So if you in general, I personally do share your concern that I think it would be good to find ways to really sort of ensure that we promote reuse alongside and prioritizing it according to the waste hierarchy. We'd really welcome any data that you have that supports that. That's to anybody on the call. Please do submit that. We'd welcome that.
If I may add something, it's also
quickly, please, Peg.
Yeah. I'm convinced that also this work, taxonomy and its criteria, they will also put some kind of pressure also in member states to develop their legislation to be more circular in that way. If you all promote more or force the circular economy. And I think it's the same discussion in many member states today, because it's a hot topic.
Thanks. And I wanted to get in a question for you, Pekka, which is why I asked you to be quick, because this next question is for you. And it's about, is there any data or evidence regarding the impact of the requirements on the price, the final price of buildings? What can you tell us about that?
Of course, it's too early to say about civil engineering works, anything in that way, but I know there's a big, great interest in this area also, but in normal buildings, very good example is improving energy efficiency of buildings. It has a value in my country. It's just about less use of energy, quite simply. This country is very, very awkward in that way. We are living in different climate sectors in Finland, as you know, and you can really see that. But where they get the money in this country, because it's what is happening also here is that certain areas in Finland are not, they don't get that easy loans and make improvements, for instance, in energy renovations and so on. But it will have meaning. It's clear. Very good example. City of Helsinki. They just increased the price of district heating by 30%. Just that's what they are going to do. And just imagine the price of energy in the future. Everybody's discussing about there's enough low carbon electricity available. Perhaps there is, but what is the price? And that's why energy performance the buildings and energy efficiency will play a key role.
Anyone else? Yes, Marcia, please.
Yes, thank you, Sue. I just want to, because there are a couple of questions just to clarify. we received a first set of activity, and that was they were prioritized according to a study that's been done before the European platform from a consultancy in the European Commission. According to the study, they identify a first set of activity that has a hotspot, so they can really contribute. There can be improvement potential. So it's not complete. We have not finished. The set that you see now is just the first step, and it will be part of the second delegated act. But the European platform stays continuously. We will work continuously on further batch of activity, and also we will open like a consultation, at least a tool to interact with other stakeholders and receive in a clear slot time. We will receive a proposal of other activity that have not been assessed yet. So we have not managed now because we have really crazy time schedules, less than 1 year to do everything. But we will open the floor actually to receive your input. You will be informed, and for the next batch. So just the two, it's nothing close. It will continue.
Okay. We have another question now from Gregory Richardson. Apologies to people that are disappointed that your question's not being asked. If you could keep it short, it would help me, because the questions that have got 5 or 6 sentences, very difficult for me to actually ask a very short question. So next question is yes, from Gregory. Does the acquisition and the ownership criteria apply to all building types, including industrial facilities? Marcia, can you help us with this one?
I would pass to Stephen, actually. That's just
happy to take that
just
one.
to clarify, thanks. Stephen, sorry, I have not told the people, and that's not nice. I mean, Stephen was the leader of the sector team's secretary for the group of buildings. So he was leading the work on the buildings and construction sector.
Thanks, Marcia. Administering is probably a better word than leading. So the question, I think if I've understood it correctly, the answer is probably yes. There isn't a separation of different types of buildings. So if it's a building, then yes, the acquisition and ownership criteria would apply. Yeah, that would be, I'll try and keep that short. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks. Question here from Tracy Pickerill. Does the categorization of construction and buildings specify data collection of reuse and restoration of heritage buildings, acknowledging the fact that there's embodied energy in historic structures? Who wants to take this one?
I can try. So I guess the point would be a historic building has sort of if it's had a long life, then it's from a sort of circularity and life cycle perspective, that's obviously a good thing. In terms of the criteria here, we haven't. I don't think we've got anything that would sort of particularly give credit for that. I guess, and this, I mean, I see there's a couple of questions around acquisition and ownership for circularity, and it's correct, we don't have a separate sort of set of criteria for acquiring circular buildings in that sense. So again, would welcome evidence that would support developing such a set of criteria. I think it's difficult to sort of give credit for the benefit of historic buildings. But I guess LCA would be the tool to try and do that. So again, a difficult question, not easy to answer, but that's my attempt to give a short response.
May I add something? Well, there was very good questions about this. Can you really apply the criteria to all kind of buildings? And it's there's very good simple. We are testing this criteria already now in Finland. in certain cases. And a very good example of my single family house, it's very easy to test, for instance, air tightness here. But you just go to shopping center, so it's impossible, or certain types of office buildings, not that easy piece of cake. And that's a very good example. It's clear that we will get feedback also on how to develop criteria to be fair and also pragmatic. It's clear. And if I may answer, there's one very important question. it was about the data, and it was dealing with, for instance, levels and making building level assessments based on EN standards 15978, which is now under revision, in fact. And it was a question about EPDs, and it's an important part because European Commission will refer to EPDs according to EN 15804 standard. For instance, perhaps in the future CE marking, it's clear. That's what they are, that's their intention. And also ISO standards, they are more or less basis for EN 15804. So it means that today there's an ISO and EN standards are in that way parallel, because there might also come goods, I mean building products from Australia, USA, and so on. And that's why we are making this parallel work according to so-called Vienna Agreement in the standardization to be fair to all products. Perhaps that was an answer. EN 15804 is similar than ISO 21930 standard. They are both for building products or construction products, and they're EPDs.
May I add something to it? I mean, generally, again, we try to take into account all the state of the art. So EPD, eco-label, all the European tool and certification scheme that already are there. So that was generally for all the sector. That was, of course, the point is that we need to define a criteria that somehow give a threshold, qualitative or quantitative. So it's important to have data on more buildings at different European levels. So that was the difficulties. And of course, don't forget, we had really not so much time so to do it, to develop. That's why we really invite you to read and to give us feedback you can go, it's quite easy, the structure of the consultation process. You can go there, choose exactly the economic activity that you want to work on and you want to give a feedback. So you don't have to read all the report, goes there, and then there is a specific question that you have to answer. So it's really structured. And then please, I really invite you to give a feedback, to give us also sources that maybe we have missed. So it's exactly, that's the time to support us in our work. Unfortunately, according to the structure of the platform, we could not invite you directly before, because only a group of organization are allowed to be part of the platform, but through them you could have already delivered some feedback, but that's or in the consultation process where it actually is open to all the stakeholders. So one question on enabling, maybe if I can, Sue, because I see a further question on enabling. Watch out with the enabling activity. We work, relatively late, because we focus at first on one that are mainly deliver a substantial contribution, but then of course in working with it we identify some enabling activity, but the enabling activity has to have their own performance. So we need also to define a criteria for their own performance, and then also enabling the substantial contribution to another activity. So they are both. That's why it's not easy, and even there I definitely invite you to look at what we have and give a feedback and what you think that and give your opinion.
Thank you. We are coming very swiftly to the end of this webinar, and apologies again if you've asked a question and it hasn't been answered. I see that the panelists are busy writing answers in the question and answer forum as well. I have a quick question for the organizers actually before I wrap this up. Can anyone tell me, Tessa or Stephen, are the questions saved? Is it possible to feed answers back after the webinar? Just a practical question.
I think so, Sue. We'll do our best. I think it's all saved in the recording, so we'll try and deal with some of them in follow-up.
I find it very important that we can really answer the questions because they were very good ones. And for instance, this recycling reuse issue, it's very important to understand also the situations in different member states. Why we can't, because there are a lot of projects ongoing in different member states. Also, very good example is so-called end of waste criteria, which are now under development also. For instance, in Finland, we have a project on this, and they all have effect on this issue.
We will look into that. Thank you.
Well, we're not going to answer any more today, unfortunately, not in this webinar at least, because we've come to the end. So I would like to say that we will try and follow up on the questions that were not answered. Thank you very much for your questions in the forum during this webinar. And I would like to close now by thanking, first of all, our speakers, Marcia, Becca, and Stephen. Also the organizers. A lot of work goes into these small events. It might not look like it, but it does. And of course, to all of you for participating. And before you go, I'd like to remind you once again to reply to the consultation before the deadline of the 24th of September. And I've been asked to say, don't be discouraged because there are many, many pages, but only a few are relevant to construction. So I hope that will give you an incentive to have a look. Thank you very much. I wish you a very nice day, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Everybody, thanks, Sue.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.